The success of the Beatles spread throughout the world, and many bands started to put their spin on this new creative pop sound. In Australia, the Easybeats did this to perfection, and we're going to learn about their history here on Pop Goes the 60s.
It's so easy. Monday morning feels so bad. Folks are going and a place will be mine.
The Easybeats formed in Australia, and generally they're thought of as an Australian band, but technically none of the members were from Australia. They were all from parts of Europe. And back then, foreigners that were housed in government facility in Sydney upon arrival, then kept there for lengthy periods. They wound up at a facility called Villawood Migrant Hostel in New South Wales, and that's where all these members met. Now, the members were Stevie Wright, who was from Leeds, England, Gordon Fleet, who was from Liverpool, George Young from Glasgow, Scotland, and Johannes van der Berg from the Netherlands, and Dingman van der Sloot, also from the Netherlands. Now, Dingman van der Sloot, that doesn't quite roll off the tongue, so he changed his name to Dick Diamond, and Johannes van der Berg changed his name to Harry Vanda. And Harry didn't know English very well, and Dick had been there several years already, so he helped Harry on his English. The group's early rehearsals were done in the hostel's laundry room. When migrants were finally allowed to leave the facilities, the group started playing out at teen hangouts in Sydney and started going by the name the Easybeats. Being migrants put them at the bottom of the social class scale, and that's what made them stick together. It also was very hard for them to break through in Australia because they were migrants, and this just made them work harder. Liverpudlian Gordon Snowy Fleet had been in several Liverpool groups, and he played on the same bill as the Beatles on a few occasions. So it was really his guidance. He was also a few years older than the other members, but he had the idea to copy the Mercy sound, and that was what gave the band their jolt of energy. Because the Beatles were so huge, it just took over everything in the world, and all the teens were crazy all over the English-speaking countries. In Australia, bands were all you had to do was be in a band and you get noticed. Well, a guy named Mike Vaughan noticed the Easybeats. Now, he had been in real estate, and he approached them to be their manager, and he did become their manager. And it wasn't very long before he hooked them up with a publisher called J. Albert and Son Publishing. Now, the son of the Albert Publishing was Ted Albert, and he was their record producer. All right, let's look at the members of the group here and with the instruments that they played. We have Stevie Wright on lead vocals and organ and percussion. We have Gordon Snowy Fleet on drums and bongos. We have George Young, vocals, rhythm guitar, piano, organ. Harry Vanda, vocals, lead guitar, 12-string guitar. And finally, Dick Diamond on vocals and bass guitar. Their first recordings were rather rough and raw.
Yeah, I miss her.
So you hear some of the high energy and the bluesy style being formed into the Easybeats music. They were very much enamored with the Beatles, and they played some for their first gigs in 1964 at a music venue at a place called, get this, Beatle Village. So that's how big the Beatles made an impact in Australia. And Beatlemania increased the demand for bands, and they quickly signed with EMI's Parlophone. For My Woman was a self-penned, sneering single, which was their first try, and it got to number 33, which wasn't too bad. But their next single got into the top 10. She's So Fine hit number 3 and broke them nationally in Australia. And their concerts became really crazy, like reaching the hysteria of Beatle concerts. So the Australian press picked up on this, and just like Beatles had Beatlemania, they called this Easy Fever.
Oh, they're the most fantastic group in Australia, I think.
How do they compare with the Beatles?
Oh, they're better by millions. They're better by millions.
What do you get out of coming out here?
They're fabulous group. I love them, especially Harry.
What about PJ?
No, he's all right, but I'm not over-wrapped in him.
Yeah. Why are you wrapped in the others then?
I've seen Stevie a lot, the Easybeats a lot. They're marvellous.
What's your boyfriend think about this?
haven't got one. She's got one, but you know. Got one, but you know. Harry's the only one for her. Harry's the only one for me. I love him.
So with a hit on their hands, they started recording their first album called Easy. Now this was produced by Ted Albert, and most of the songs on here, really all the songs are self-penned, mostly by George Young and Stevie Wright, with 3 songs contributed by Harry Vanda. Now mind you, they had just started writing songs, so these songs are a bit rough around the edges and are rather unremarkable, but one of the things I noticed is they have very good guitar hooks in these early songs. Now the next batch of songs they recorded and released were some very successful singles. Now all these songs made the top 10 in Australia, which may suggest some of maybe the lack of competition on the charts down there. But the next song, which I really love, is called Sad, Lonely and Blue. And this sounded a little bit more like a folk rock song. This morose song with chiming guitars was a little bit different than the prior singles, and the fans didn't respond to it as well. It only charted at number 21. Now those singles were on the forthcoming album, It's Too Easy. It's Too Easy charted on the Australian album charts at number 3, while the first album had been number 4. So these are pretty big selling records.
Hard to find a way, baby, baby, hold me.
We are now in 1966, and the song Trying So Hard was on an EP, and that hit number 1. So that gave some momentum to their next single, which was called Sorry.
My baby, think I know just why. Sorry, sorry.
Sorry became the number 1 record they were looking for, and they started working on their third album, second in 1966, called Volume 3.
Will things be same before I went away? Come, babe, take me away. It was last night just by chance. Can't you leave her? When will you see that she's too good for you?
Now those songs I just played were probably the strongest tracks off of Volume 3, and this album was a very big hit. It hit number 7 on the Australian charts, and despite these good guitar hooks, I would still say that their songwriting was still in its early stages.
I'm going out of my mind 'cause of a girl like you.
The Easybeats were ruling Australian charts in 65 and 66. They had 8 singles that were all big hits and 3 top-selling albums. But you could only play the big 6 cities in Australia so many times, so they had to figure out, well, where do we go from here? And the idea was to try to break into the UK market. The Easybeats' massive success in Australia made it easy for manager Mike Vaughan to get them a deal with United Artists. So United Artists would be their record company and distributor outside of Australia, and they decided to shift their operations to London. Now this was financed by J. Alberts and Sons Publishing, and Ted Albert, he's the son, he was the producer of their music on the first 3 albums, and he was planning to maintain his position as producer. Settling in London was not as easy as the band thought it would be. Now, as I said, J. Albert and Sons had financed this, but they didn't have tons of money. And one of the first problems they faced was housing. Nobody really wanted a pop band to rent. They didn't want to rent to them. So they had to at first rent in hotels and stay in hotels, which was a lot more expensive. Meanwhile, the group was going to different clubs, checking out the Marquee, Bag of Nails, and they were starting to kind of mingle a little bit with the pop scene, which was really good for them. The plan was to integrate them slowly into the London scene, because it was really a culture shock for them. They were backwoods guys. They weren't really big city guys. So this was kind of baptism by fire. As the band got settled in London, they began recording at EMI. And one of the first things United Artists did was to reject all of their songs. They didn't think they were sophisticated enough for the UK market. And the second thing they did is they ousted Ted Albert as the producer, and they brought in Shel Talmy. Now, Shel Talmy was kind of a hot American producer who had been producing The Who, The Kinks, and The Creation. So they brought him in to inject some life into some of their songs. Each week, Shel Talmy had them bring in songs, and he would say, yeah, this is good or this is not good. He would reject things and have them fine-tune things. Is at this time, Stevie Wright fell out of the writing partnership with George Young. It was Young and Wright that did most of the writing together on the first 3 albums, and Harry Vanda had done some writing, but at this point Harry Vanda started writing with George Young, and Vanda's English was improving greatly, as was his songwriting. The group finally brought in a song that Talmy liked, and that was a song called Friday on My Mind. And this song, as soon as he heard the opening guitar lick in the first part of the song, he said, yeah, you've really got something here, now go back and work on it. So they did that, brought it back, and recorded it in just a few takes. Now, while they were recording, they were also doing some live gigs, and their first really big live gig was November 13th, 1966, at Brian Epstein's Saville Theater. And they were opening for the Four Tops. There were other bands on the bill as well. Easybeats were on the bottom of the bill. But with Epstein signing the Easybeats, that opened up other opportunities for them, and the single started to climb the charts. With the aid of some of the pirate radio stations, Friday on My Mind hit number 6 in the UK, number 16 in the US, and all the way to number 1 in Australia. It sold over 1 million copies worldwide. So of course they're going to start working on an album, and that was this one called Good Friday, with Shel Talmy at the helm and his protege Glyn Johns engineering. Who'll Be the One, which was the follow-up single, which was recorded during these album sessions, missed the UK charts entirely, and it only got to number 14 on the Australian charts. It was odd because they were touring with the Rolling Stones during this time, so how it didn't chart, I'm not quite sure. I guess it just didn't resonate with the public. The album Good Friday was recorded during the first half of 1967, and the tracks you just heard were what I consider the best songs from this. A rather paltry amount of good quality songs on this as far as the album cuts are concerned. So I don't know how bad these songs were that were rejected. I didn't think they could be much worse than some of these album tracks on here.
Visions haunt my dreams, creepy, crawly things. She's just bad as seems that Mandy.
Nonetheless, this album did not get released in Australia for some contractual reasons. Instead, they released some kind of a compilation. Now in America, they released basically the same album with a different title and a different cover called Friday on My Mind. Now, the Easybeats were still hot property, having had the #1 hit in Australia, Friday on My Mind, and the Australian Broadcast Commission wanted to do a documentary on the group, much in the same vein of a Dick Lester film. So they hired Peter Clifton, who was a producer and director, to do the film. Now, Peter Clifton, you may remember that name. He did The Song Remains the Same years later for Zeppelin. So this was one of his earlier works. And this was to be a 50-minute documentary. So unfortunately, he did a lot of work on this. And when the films got back to Australia, that some of them had gotten damaged. So they couldn't use part of the films. And they wound up with a 35-minute documentary instead. And the ABC, the Australian Broadcast Commission, didn't want that. They rejected it. So it was never shown.
Groveling in the gutter, pretty words I try to utter. So low I'm lying crawling. Funny thing about gold. It's hard to choose which girl absolute.
The film was titled Easy Come, Easy Go, and it was lost for 45 years until some of it turned up, and what you just saw was some of the rescued film that finally got released in 2012. Not only was this film lost originally, but they soon lost producer Shel Talmy. Now, Ted Albert, who didn't like being replaced as producer, he's back in Australia working with the management, and he was part of the publishers who had funded the group's move to London. He basically was trying to not pay Shel Talmy some of the royalties on the album, this album he worked on, and on Friday on My Mind. So Talmy, to the day he died, said he never got paid for any of this, but as it turns out, he stormed out and wouldn't work with them anymore, leaving the production duties in the hands of Glyn Johns. By this time, they were on another tour with the Stones in Europe, and they released their next single, Heaven and Hell.
You've got me going between heaven and hell. The ups and downs of
Now, Heaven and Hell was a bit risky because it had a line in there that got it banned on both the BBC and in some stations in the United States. And that line went like this: discovering someone else in your bed, they replaced that with the line, discovering her love has gone dead. So anyway, that song did not chart in either the United States or the UK, but it did make #8 in Australia. By late 1967, Snowy Fleet had left the group. He didn't leave over issues with the group so much as it was he just missed his wife and kids and was away from them so much touring. And just like any band, you're going to be away from home a lot. So he was the first casualty of the group and was replaced by Tony Cahill.
The Easybeats on about Coca-Cola.
sitting here Thursday in my lonely room, thinking about a bottle of Coke. Listen, Coca-Cola. So I bought one for the band. Make life swing with Coca-Cola. Make life swing with Coke. Make life swing with Coca-Cola.
The band did several endorsements like the Coke commercials you just heard. And by mid-1967, they were working on their follow-up album to Good Friday, or Friday on My Mind. And that was to be titled Good Times. And this was being worked on with Glyn Johns. Now, Johns had been working with the Stones, and the Small Faces, and his stock was beginning to rise. So they had a lot of confidence in Johns, and the next album was recorded rather quickly before they headed off on a tour of the States. Unfortunately, they were called back from this tour in the States because due to legal issues between the band and the Australian production company, Albert Productions, the album got shelved. It was not able to be released.
We'll make it together. Mr. Riley. Mr. Riley sweeps the floor and Higginbottom and Clive. Dear Amanda's story.
Those songs were from the unreleased fifth album, and Nicky Hopkins was brought in to add to the arrangements a bit. And these songs were eventually released on an album called The Shame Just Drained, a compilation that was released later in the mid-70s. Despite the setback, the group still continued working on singles. So by late 67, early 68, the Easybeats singles started to chart lower and lower. And by this time, you had the rock groups were doing album-oriented rock more so. So if you weren't having hits on the charts, you better be selling albums. And their album wasn't out yet, so they didn't have one really to sell. So finally, the album came out in May of 1968 called Vigil. And the term Vigil came from their fans holding a vigil waiting for this album to come out. This is the UK version, and it was released in two different packages. This is the United States version. And if you see, they used the front cover of this for the back cover on the United States version, which they called Falling Off the Edge of the World. For my money, this is the better looking cover. I think this is a lousy looking cover. But these albums are relatively similar, and the problem was that it did not chart.
And the rain comes pouring down.
Hello, How Are You and Land of Make Believe are the two latest singles in support of this album. And Hello, How Are You did chart in the UK at number 20, so not bad. But this was a ballad, and this was kind of outside of what their fans in Australia expected of them. So they started to turn off some of those fans a little bit. Meanwhile, they were doing songs like this. We All Live Happily Together is a goofy song, and the reason it's goofy is because Vanda and Young were not big fans of this hippie style of music that was coming out. So this was kind of a send-up of the hippie music, and it's kind of funny, but they really had to play ball. If you didn't incorporate some of the new psychedelic production styles, you were going to be out. So they actually did start to become more progressive in the studio and came up with a batch of fine songs. Realizing that their songs weren't charting high anymore, Vanda and Young switched gears and started concentrating on writing more pop songs for other groups.
You can stay until the morning. Don't you even worry, like they've changed your ass. Sit back, don't relax. Everything is the way you gave me pain. Babe, I can't stand it. Through all this misery.
Bring a Little Lovin' was a hit for Los Bravos. Station on 3rd Avenue was a minor hit for Marmalade. They did a song for Amen Corner. So these songs weren't huge hits, but they started to get a little more, I guess, reaction on the charts when other groups did their songs. That last song, I Can't Stand It, sounds a little bit like I'm Losing You from the Temptations. For their next single, they pulled out all the stops and they invited Steve Merritt to guest on the record.
It's gonna be right. think I'm gonna lay me down and die. Yesterday my mama said to stay home.
Good Times got to number 22, so that was a little bit better. Lay Me Down only charted at number 59, so you can see that they were still having a little difficulty on the charts. This is a song, the song Good Times is somewhat known for the often told and often repeated story that Paul McCartney heard it on the radio, pulled his car over and called the radio station to ask who was singing that, and he requested it to be played again. So we always have McCartney pulling over and calling up the radio station. He wanted to produce. The Beatles didn't want to be produced by him, but McCartney obviously wanted to produce somebody. So anyway, I thought that was a unique story. But Lay Me Down was their lowest charting single in Australia. And I think that because the wait for this album, Vigil, was so long, they just lost momentum even in their home country. Although Vigil didn't sell well and didn't chart well, it was rather critically acclaimed. There were some mixed reviews, but generally it was well received. I think this is probably their best album is from a songwriting standpoint, and the production sounds, it's a little more full. So I think this is one of their finest moments. Unfortunately, things began to unravel. Drug use came in, and the touring took its toll, and Vanda and Young started writing more songs for other artists that alienated him from the rest of the band as well. All right, since Vigil did not chart, nor did Falling Off the Edge of the World in the States, United Artists decided not to re-sign the Easybeats. This album had stiffs, so they were parting ways with them. So they found a new record company and they signed with Polydor and recorded their next single, St. Louis. Now, St. Louis was a surprise hit at number 21 and even charted in the States at number 100. Barely eking on the chart, but it still charted. So this is the next album they started working on. It's called Friends. And this was produced by former Nirvana member Ray Singer. The song St. Louis and the B-side were full productions, but what ended up happening was the rest of the album essentially became demo recordings by Vanda and Young with band members supporting them. In fall of 1969, the band did a short European tour, followed by a 5-week tour in Australia, where they did multiple television appearances too. And this homecoming to Australia was not really a homecoming as such, but both of these tours were designed to help them pay down some bills. They were in debt and they owed money. Their albums weren't selling, and they had some debts to pay down. And the final show in Australia unfortunately only lasted 20 minutes before the crowd got out of hand and they had to shut it down. This ended up being their final performance. So what a way to end the band, huh? This album eventually came out in very early 1970, but by then the band had already broken up. Now, those were a couple of the better songs off this album. This album isn't that good. I mean, it does sound ultimately like a bunch of demos. There's not a lot of feeling or effort put into them, although there are a couple good songs. Now, meanwhile, in Australia, there was a compilation of Volume 2 Greatest Hits that came out before this to kind of fill the space in between albums. And that compilation made use of old demo recordings as well. The band unfortunately went out with a whimper, and there wasn't much to be said for the group. They had pretty much worn out their welcome and gone as far as they could go, I guess. And Stevie Wright went on his own into a solo career, was in several bands bearing his name. Vanda and Young formed Flash in the Pan, and they also produced AC/DC's first 6 albums. George Young's younger brother, Malcolm and Angus, were in AC/DC. There was a 4th young brother named Alex who was in the group Grapefruit. So they, very, very solid musical family. And the success the group had after the Easybeats really centered around the Young brothers. Okay, so we've got Friends. So that wasn't the end of it, really. That album I mentioned earlier, the unreleased album after Good Friday, is this one, The Shame Just Drained. This came out in 1977, and this has a lot of those songs that were not released, plus some other demos. This is actually not a bad record to have. If you're a completist, this is a good one to have.
I thought I
This is another one that I picked up that I really love. I'm a sucker for a girl cover, and this is somewhat of a best of called Let's Dance with the Easybeats. Now, one of my very first albums I bought as a teenager, I spent like $14 on this. It was a lot of money for me at the time. The Easybeats Absolute Anthology, a double album of their entire career from 65 to 70, culminating with the St. Louis single. And if you were to look for a vinyl compilation, this would maybe be a good starting point. If you can find it, this came out in 1980. Another good compilation you may have seen over the years is one by Rhino that came out in 1985 called The Best of the Easybeats. It's a single disc. And then the very best of Friday on My Mind, that was Verace Saraband, that was a CD that came out. Now there was a very huge box set that came out called The Complete Easybeats, which had 6 CDs. It's called The Ultimate Collection. Unfortunately, that Ultimate Collection did not have any of the songs from the Friends album, including one of their hits, St. Louis. So I don't know if you can call that complete, but one of the things you'll see on the Easybeats, as we went through these songs, obviously this group were not writing songs that were on par with, you know, the Beatles or the Stones or the Kinks, but they had some very good songs, but you can see why they didn't really catch on in a bigger way. And in this Complete Easybeats box set, there's a line in here where the writer explains that George Young began to emerge as a creative genius on the level of a Ray Davies, Pete Townsend, Ron Wood, or even a John Lennon. Now, I think that's going a bit far. These guys, as I said, were decent songwriters, and their niche seemed to be writing songs for other groups that had only marginal hits with them. So to say they're on the level of Davies, Townsend, Lennon, I mean, that's hyperbole, and you do get that with some of these retrospectives that really are trying to over pump up the band. I mean, this group had like 6 albums. This is a lot, really 7 albums if you include the unreleased stuff. So they had a lot of stuff. So as you go through this, there's some stuff you can cherry pick and probably make a very good playlist out of some of this stuff. But boy, to get all these albums, it's an expense. And, you know, I don't know if they're really, it's not like the Kinks, you know, it's not that kind of listening experience. Now, I'm sure some of you maybe really like this stuff, and digging in some of these, to find some of these nuggets, you're going to find them. So I hope I played enough of those for you to give you an idea of a flavor of what you can find out if you do decide to purchase any of these albums. Now, for those of you who are big Easybeat fans, you're going to want to check out the book by John Tate called Vanda and Young Inside Australia's Hit Factory. That goes into a lot of the story of this group. As I said, there's plenty of compilations out there for you to check out. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support you give me, and I've had a lot of new subscribers, so I thank you for that. If you're interested in supporting me more, there are some links below. My website, popgoesstixies.com, showcases some of my merchandise. And if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and helps me grow, and that helps me grow to new people like you. So thank you for watching. Pop Goes the 60s.